and welcome to this week's Karma Cards. So yesterday, November 8th, we had a total lunar eclipse when the moon was full in the sign of Taurus. And it was a pretty big, intense energy. And I want to talk a little bit about it because we're still underneath this influence. And I think it might help you see any emotional patterns that might be playing out right now. So the first thing I want to talk about with this energy is the fact that we have a lot of planets in fixed signs. We have 5 planets right now in fixed signs. Yesterday we had 6 planets in fixed signs because the moon was in the sign of Taurus. So let's break this down. What are the fixed signs? The fixed signs of the zodiac are Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo. And right now we have a stellium happening in Scorpio. That means 3 or more planets in that sign, as well as a couple planets in Taurus and planet in Aquarius still. That's Saturn. So we've got a lot of this fixed energy. And when we're looking at astrology and fixed energy is one variable of the signs. And the fixed signs represent the pure seasons of the time period. So for example, Scorpio represents pure fall. So when we're in the sign of Scorpio, we are experiencing true fall. Just like when we're in the sign of Leo, we're experiencing true summer. In the sign of Taurus, true spring. And in the sign of Aquarius, true winter, right? So we're in the middle of it. And it means that it's constant. You get what you expect to get with a fixed sign, so you get the same energy. And I like to use the seasons because it's a good visual. So it's like when you're in the middle of Scorpio season, you get the fall that you expect to get. It's pretty consistent that time of year. Whereas with the other signs, they're representing a beginning. That's the cardinal signs. And the mutable signs represent variations and changes. And so this is when seasons can be shorter or longer, is when we move into those types of signs. So that's kind of what we're looking at just on a atmospheric level. But on an energetic level, what we're looking at here is with fixed sign energy, it's consistent, right? It holds the same. It acts the same. It can be very stubborn, just like the word fixed. It doesn't move. These signs are very routine in their approach. They're creatures of habit and they can become inflexible. So when we're underneath this heavy fixed energy, that has an energetic effect on us. And since this particular full moon was a very watery moon, so a lot of elemental water in this moon, it's telling us that our emotional state can become very fixed, immovable, sort of set in place. And this gets me to think about black and white thinking, because it's a thing that I know happens when we get in this place, is we get very polarized in our thinking. So we start to think of, like, if something's not working well for us, we can go into that place of nothing's going to work. Or let's say you're having a downturn in your relationship or your job, then immediately it's like, this is a shitty job, it's a shitty relationship. And that might be true for the moment, but it's too generalized to express the full experience. And so when we get in these states of black and white thinking, it has a massive impact on our emotional state. I mean, many heavy emotional states like depression and anxiety, for example, are actually connected to going to black and white, too generalized in your thinking. Everything is all or nothing. And what's really interesting is, like, on the 8th, which was yesterday, we had the United States midterm election, and just listening to people talk about it, I can hear the extreme black and white thinking going on. It's all or nothing. There's no nuance in a lot of the commentators that are talking about it. And I find it so interesting, and it inspired me to talk about black and white thinking, because it's not the world that we live in. We're not all good. We're not all bad. We are not all one way or all another. We are complex and nuanced. And when we get in this fixed mindset, it's easy to go black and white. In fact, this is part of the challenge of moving through fourth density, the beginning of fourth density. It is this detox polarization process. So before we move into a more unified state, the first thing that happens is this sort of polarization. And it's happening in the mind just as much as it's happening in energy. So what is the benefit of a polarized thinking, or all or nothing, or black and white thinking? Well, it helps us to sort ideas through simplicity, right? When we actually do this in our mind, when we're like, this is all good or it's all bad, it helps us to make decisions. The problem with it, though, is that we can get locked into this thinking and start viewing our life this way. And so part of what happens with black and white thinking is it puts us in a comfort zone, right? We tend to think we know all the details, know everything, because we're in this very like there's right and wrong, there's good and bad. It's this or that. It can't be both, right? And in that space, we gain this sort of false sense of security and therefore comfort. And that's why the brain easily stays there. It's also connected to the left hemisphere. And the left hemisphere is the organizational part of our brain. It is the part that very much attaches to black and white thinking, which is why most of us can experience it, right? Where most of us can go into this place. So the longer we stay in sort of this logic only approach, the mind settles into that sorting situation, because the left part of our brain, the logical part, wants to compartmentalize. It wants to like write the name of whatever this experience is on the outside of the box, stick the experience into the box, put the lid on it, call it done. I know what that is, and move on. And when we're living predominantly from that side of the brain, what happens is we start to see things in absolutes, where maybe you're having a normal day, but then you get some bad news, and suddenly your brain takes it and says, this is the worst day ever. Is it the worst day ever, or was it categorized that way because of a negative event that happened? And so if we're living predominantly in the left hemisphere, if we're logic driven, we will start to really polarize in black and white thinking. Now, this is where it's really interesting, because a lot of like left hemisphere, strictly left hemisphere people, this is where abstract concepts like faith or theology or nuance, they tend to miss it because it doesn't have an absolute to it, right? When we're talking about faith or what's happening in energy, things you can't see, things that can't be quantified, or as we learn through like quantum physics that the observer has an impact on what's happening, then this creates cognitive dissonance, because there is no absolute you can put on it. You can't say absolutely every experience happens this way and therefore this is the experience. It challenges that hemisphere of the brain, and therefore it can only really be understood or accessed from the right hemisphere of the brain, where we can actually work with abstract constructs, right? So what's really interesting is within this window of time, we're still underneath this influence. And I was just looking at the aspects, so the planetary aspects and how they're playing together. Not only do we have quite a few planets in these fixed signs, but they're relating to each other in these fixed ways a lot. So we're getting this very like locked in type of energy where we are looking at things, but we're looking at them through this fixed lens of absolutes. And it can create these false understandings. It's a limited understanding because nothing is absolute. For example, if, let's say your spouse always leaves a like wet dish rag in the sink because they use it and they leave it there. And you're the kind of person who you see that and you're like, oh, I can't deal with, old wet dish rags. I want that hung up or put in the wash or something like that. And you tell them, please stop doing that. I don't like that there. And they continue to do it because it's just their preference. I mean, this is like part of like my own personal experience with my marriage. I hate that. I hate the wet washcloth in the sink. My husband hates it when I put the cutting boards in the dishwasher weird. And yet my justification for doing that, it makes sense to me. His justification for putting the washcloth in the sink makes sense to him. And so we're always sort of like at these points butting heads. When we're in a place of seeing nuance, we can recognize that those events are happening because of preference. This person has a preference for this person has a preference for that. It doesn't mean that this person hates you or dislikes you or wishes you discomfort. It simply means that they're putting their preference over your preference. And when we're in that nuanced place, we can see it. When we're coming into a situation where there's black and white thinking involved, we will experience this sort of transgression against your preference and see it as you're attacking me. You're attacking me. You're doing something to me. You always do this to me. You never listen to me, right? So always and never, if we're using those kind of statements, then we know we're in a position where we're actually locked into black and white thinking. And those are just small ways that it can show up. But you'll notice if that's the mindset, then it's like you're programming your mind to look for more problems, especially when it's connected to that person or similar situations. You might notice that you start to cascade in your thoughts about not only are you always doing this here or never listening to me here, you don't listen to me over there, and your brain will start to really create this stark contrast of polarization. And this is how we create these mountains out of molehills. So we're in this moment right now of that type of energy. And I was asking my team about it. I'm like, well, what is it that we need to do to shift through this energy? Because while we have this combination of planets hanging out in these fixed signs, they have a tendency also to sort of slow us or keep us in a moment right now as they're sitting in these signs. Now, some of them will move soon. For example, Mercury and Venus are faster moving planets. And, when the sun moves into Sagittarius soon, we will have shifted out of that sort of lock. But for right now, it wants us to sit in a moment and be with it. So what we need to learn how to do is how do we sit in this moment but not go to an extreme, because our emotions are being pulled to an extreme. So how do we sit in a moment that we're being asked to sit in? So with this energy here, it's getting us to sit with something, sit with how we're looking at something. How do we sit there and not go to the extreme? And the only way that I understand that we can do this is to start recognizing nuance. Even by starting with, I can tell I am going into all or nothing thinking because I'm listening to the words, like I might say always or never, all the time, things like that. And usually what happens with black and white thinking is it generally leads to catastrophizing. So you don't, when you're in that left hemisphere, it's not the more positive side of the brain, right? There's a lot of, that's why logic and pessimism tend to be very close together. You can be a very logical person and it tends to lead to pessimism because that side of the brain does not respond in a positive way. It as it separates and takes away nuance, things start to feel overwhelming and catastrophizing. So if you find yourself doing that, let's say with your business or your work, something goes wrong, something is off, it's not working the way it's supposed to, maybe things were going well, but now there's a conflict with a coworker or a boss, and you're starting to feel tension. And in your brain, if you're going into black and white thinking, you're like, actually formulating thoughts about how this has been bad all along, and now you're just starting to see it, and now it's going to lead to some kind of maybe disciplinary action or a threat to you. And so your brain continues to really polarize and pull things apart and try to pull information into it that would prove this theory. As we're doing that, we're going more extreme emotionally. We're feeling worse. Now suddenly I feel resistant and I want to rebel and I want to push back or fight back, or I want to quit and be done, right? These are extreme emotional responses to these thoughts, these polarizing thoughts that we're having. And so part of how we bring ourselves back is simply by acknowledging that there is nuance. So the technique really is about, is it really this bad, or am I just telling myself it's this bad? And if we can have that conscious awareness of doing that, is it really this bad, or am I telling myself it's this bad? That kind of brings us out of this, again, extreme polarization. It kind of pauses the process, and we're activating our awareness and our memory to look for where is the gray area? Where is the nuance? Has today been all bad, or is this last 15 minutes bad? Is the type of situation. So again, how we sort of pause this process is acknowledge nuance. Acknowledge it and start to look for nuance. For example, going back to the spousal situation where one spouse is, or both spouses are doing things that are displeasing you. And it's easy to go like, you don't care, my feelings don't matter to you. Again, this is a type of polarization. So if I acknowledge the nuance, it's like, well, right before the whole washcloth incident, my husband made me lunch. And he made me lunch and he used that washcloth to wash the pan. And so that's why it's there. And so is he this person who doesn't care about me? Well, if he didn't care about me, wouldn't make lunch, right? So you see how you really have to like stop the train. The brakes are recognizing nuance. And so the other thing is, the other way you can approach this is if you're feeling that all or nothing feeling, especially around things that don't work, because that is an area that's being called to the forefront right now, just through this lunar energy and all these planetary alignments, is look at what's not working. That's coming up right in our face, looking at what's not working. Rather than going extreme or polarized in then I give up, this doesn't work, I'm quitting, I'm walking away, I'm shutting it down. Rather than going to that extreme of a response to it, since we're going to be here for a minute and sit with it, it's instead of, I'm done, this doesn't work, it's clear to me now it doesn't work, and I'm totally done. We're being asked to take a step back and go, I'm done right now. I'm done for today. I'm calling it done. Like, I will reapproach this tomorrow, but for now I'm done. So again, it's asking us to shorten that extremity and bring it into a more nuanced place where in this moment I feel done, but I will re-examine the situation tomorrow. Right? So we're not forcing ourselves to stay in something that doesn't feel good, and we're not going to the extreme of throwing everything away because we're being shown a moment of this is what doesn't work. We're being asked to moderate that. So take a moment to look at your own situation. What's being shown to you that doesn't work, right? Instead of throwing it out, pause, say, if you're in that place where you're like, it feels too extreme, then that's not the moment to look at it. I mean, you can say, I'm putting a pin in that, as they say, and I'm going to walk away until I feel more calm or neutral about this. Because many times what we find is that it wasn't something you were supposed to completely drop. Sometimes it is. Other times it's simply learning to adapt. It's learning to adapt. It's learning to look at the situation and ask yourself to adapt. If you find that you don't see adaptation, that's another sign that maybe I'm in a more extreme or polarized place in my thinking around this. And taking a break and walking away is absolutely okay. And sometimes it's the best thing to do. Sometimes just nurturing and listening to yourself about the I feel done with this, it's okay to go, okay, then for today we put this down. And then you could check back in tomorrow and you're like, nope, still done. You're like, okay, so we're going to table this until, and then you give yourself another check-in point until it starts to neutralize and you can look at it through a more nuanced pair of eyes and see if it really is something that has run its course, or if there's a way to adapt that you couldn't see because you were in a more extreme mental and emotional place. And one of the biggest messages that came through in yesterday's spirit circle was through the numerology that was happening yesterday. It was talking so much about this shifting energy, but it was really focused on the idea of will, right? Our will versus a greater will. And the message was really about the fact that if something's not working, that that you're probably too close to it and you're not using a 40,000 foot view to look at it, right? So when we're in a problem or we're in a situation where we've come to a standstill or a head and it's not working, you've got to ask yourself, is it not working because I am pushing my own will so hard and I'm finding myself hitting the wall? If that's the case, we're actually being asked and invited to tap into a higher power energy, something inside of us, that higher connection. You can call it source, you can call it God, whatever you want to call it, but it's that greater power that works through you. And there is a level of will working at that level where it can see the forest for the trees. You know, in our human life, in our own experience, we're in the middle of that forest. So all we see are trees next to us. It's like it can be really hard to see the path and see if there's an opening or if things improve because we're right in the thick of it. And it's in this moment that Source is saying to us, there is more available to you, but it requires you letting go of the reins and handing it over to a higher power. And so this actually came through in the numerology yesterday. It was so much. We had the Tower card come up, which definitely talks about that bigger awareness, like suddenly seeing. That's the awakening card. We also had both Strength and the Chariot. Now Strength, the card of Strength, talks about the subconscious mind, which is a bigger part of our personal mind, working over the primal mind, and through its love and compassion and gentleness, it guides the primal mind, the subconscious. And then the Chariot talks about allowing that source energy through, because it's that source energy through that's directing the body. So again, the source energy, the subconscious mind, these are bigger parts of ourself. And it's like, let these bigger parts guide that smaller, more focused part, which is our human experience. And it actually came through in the channeled meditation part. So I'm going to be adding that channeled meditation from the Spirit Circle to my Modern Mystic Soul podcast. That's something that you'll be able, as soon as I'm done editing it, it'll be up. It's free. You can go listen to it. I'll put a link below to the channel so that you can check into that and hear what they had to say. It was a beautiful message inviting us to open ourselves up, open our will up to a higher will. And what I loved about it is that, again, with our higher energy, it is so loving and it's so benevolent and respectful of you. It's like, look, you can do it your way if you want to. I mean, that's why we were gifted free will. So if you want to continue to hold those reins tight and try to get life to move in the direction you demand it to, you are free to do so. Nothing's going to stop you. Nothing in energy, nothing, no part of your higher self or source energy is going to impede you there. But you might find that you keep running into these walls because of your consciousness and its limit to awareness. Whereas when we learn how to cooperate with our higher will, then we get access to that 40,000 foot view and really do get to see like how this is playing out. And it's, I won't lie, I feel like it's a scary moment. It's especially for those of us who have issues around control. It is a scary idea to be like, I have ideas, but I'm going to hand this over to you. I'm going to hand it over to my higher self, and I'm going to let that guide me. I'm going to kind of step back and allow myself to be led, which is what a lot of theology and religion asks of us. It's like, let yourself be led by this higher power. And it is easier said than done, but it is the call right now as we're being like called up and like, hey, the offer for me to help you is still open. Would you like it? Like it's up to you. But it is the path of ease and grace through this period. It doesn't mean we won't experience challenges, but it will help us move out of the challenges we find ourselves stuck in now. And of course, there's, like I said, there's other challenges we'll deal with, especially control, right? Those control issues definitely come forward when you're willing to co-create with a larger part of yourself. And so it challenges the ego. But there it is. That's where we're being invited right now. And so with that, let me share with you this week's karma cards. And before we get into the karma cards, if you are enjoying this content, please like, share, and subscribe. It really does help my channel to grow and allow me to bring you more videos on a regular basis, which I am so excited to do in the upcoming year. If you are new to karma cards, let me quickly show you how these work. I have 3 decks here: planets, signs of the zodiac, and the houses of astrology. And I've already asked my team, what is the message you have for us this week? And I've got 2 sets of answers. I have a set in red, which are action related, and a set in blue, which are outcome related. And the way that you play is you decide with your beautiful intuition, what do you need right now? Are you looking for action related guidance, or are you really interested in knowing how things resolve over the next week? And of course, you can always choose both. While you're doing that, let me tell you the timing for this reading. This reading is for November 9th through the 16th. And the flavor of this reading, we have the moon, which is so interesting because yesterday was the full moon. So here it is again, in the sign of Libra, which is all about balance and harmony, in the 7th house, which is ruled by Libra, which is all about our relationships, our partnerships. So you can tell that this energy is going to be very much about working with others this week. Now, for those of you who are choosing action, your spiritual action at this time is to defend relationships diplomatically. So you can really hear how we're being asked to stay in that more nuanced place. So diplomacy requires us to be more nuanced in our thinking. Diplomacy does not happen if we're polarized or in a black and white headspace. If it's all or nothing, there is no diplomacy there. There's no seeing the other side, right? Because with black and white thinking, there's always right or wrong. There is no, well, you're a little right and I'm a little right. It's cut dry, right? So again, this call for tapping into nuance is being asked of us specifically around relationships. So again, this area being probably the most important on the spiritual level. Other than the relationship with yourself, the next important thing is the relationship with others, because that is truly what's real. Everything else is part of that whole simulation experience we're going through. but the relationships are real and the relationships are eternal. They go on and on and on and on and on. So again, we're being asked to move out of that fixed mindset, and we do that through questioning. And again, just going back to the technique is asking, is that true? When you have that black or white thought, like you always do this, when you hear yourself say that, if you can also remind yourself, wait, is that true? Do you always do this? Well, no, it just feels that way. I feel that way. But is it a bad moment or a bad day is another good one, right? So by doing that, we are defending relationships with others, because where black and white thinking really starts to hit us is within relationship. We do it with ourselves, and that becomes our inner critic, which is a whole other conversation to talk about. But it's between that and relationships where black and white thinking can really start to cause pain in our lives. So we're being asked to stay in that nuanced space. Mental action at this time. Accept the beauty of relationships. And that's one of the saving graces around relationships. Imagine being left alone with this extreme polarization in your mind. Now, the extreme polarization in your mind, like I said, leads to emotional states like anxiety and depression. And when we're isolated with it, it's harder to get out because we don't have anything to compare it to. There's nothing that helps us see what's relative, like relationships. So relationships help us understand nuance, because when you're in relation to another person, you get to witness all of them. Whereas within your head, especially if you have an active inner critic, you don't see the nuance in yourself. So if your inner critic tells you you're a bad person, no matter what you do, then you're experiencing this very one-sided, polarized thought of yourself as a bad person. Whereas when you are in relationship to another, you can see that they have great days, they have bad days, they have moments of beautiful generosity and moments of mindlessness or selfishness. No one is all one note. And that is how relationships can truly serve us, because they are a mirror back to us that you are also not one note. You are multiple things. And it helps us to find nuance when we're having a hard time finding that within our own thoughts. Physical action at this time. Let your feelings tell you how to do it with your partner and get a fair deal. So again, we're noticing if we're having extreme thoughts. So our feelings right now are really being affected by this fixed energy. And the extreme thoughts are, right, this doesn't work, and that feeling of being frustrated or over it or done. Let that show you that that's active. And how to get the fair deal with your partner is that ability to communicate differently. And this is where one of Brene Brown's techniques really comes in handy and is a helpful tool, because you can express the thoughts you're having without attacking. And you do that through the simple statement of, okay, let's say I'm dealing with the washcloth situation again, and I see it happening. Instead of saying, oh, you always do this, you always leave this gross washcloth in the sink and it upsets me, I can say something like, the story I'm telling myself right now is that you don't care about my feelings about dealing with this gross washcloth, that you're leaving it here and you don't care that it bothers me. And by saying it in such a way, I'm taking responsibility for my thoughts and feelings around it, while being able to express it in a way that shows the person my own thought process. And I love that technique from Brene Brown. It is so helpful. And when we remember to do it, what it allows for, it's like you're showing the inner workings of what's going on. So rather than just attacking a person because of these extreme thoughts or feelings, you are showing them how you got there. when you show them how you get there, the person generally responds with, all right, I hear what you're saying. That's not at all what was happening, right? I was using it, and they'll give you their response. And so that is a great way to get a fair deal and be able to express the feelings and frustration that's going on without going into this desire to attack. Because again, remember, when that hemisphere goes into polarization, it also goes into this pessimism. It catastrophizes. It categorizes it as an insult or an attack, rather than seeing it for what it truly is. All right, so now let's look at the outcomes for this week with the moon in Libra in the 7th house of partnership and relationship. The spiritual outcome at this time is the nurturing of cooperation to perfect balance. So again, this period is coming up to help us perfect that act of balance, and not just in relationship to each other. That's how we get to practice it. But as we practice that together, we're balancing the hemispheres of our brain, because nuance lives on this side. The being able to see the shades of gray and all the different things happening, that's coming from your abstract thinking center, which is your right hemisphere. When we get both hemispheres going, then we're feeling that balanced state. Then we're able to think more critically, right? We're looking at things logically, and we're able to kind of simplify and deduce what's happening while acknowledging and seeing and reacting to the nuance of the situation. Mental outcome: feelings caused by decisions about cooperation. So again, what I was saying is that we're in an area of time where there's more emotional energy present right now, and it's creating an extreme in feeling. And as we focus on how do I see this differently, where can I adjust my thinking, which really is a sovereign state to be in, right? So it takes us out of any victimhood that black and white thinking can create. And it is how victims think, is very black and white. As we look for and acknowledge the nuance in a situation, it allows for us to step into our sovereignty, because we're like, well, there's two sides to a street. There's two sides to an argument there, right? So we start to recognize, okay, I have a part in this. What's my part? And if we get down to it and we're like, okay, it's how I'm viewing it, how I'm thinking about it, that allows us to actually come out of extreme emotional states and back into a more balanced state, a calmer state. And then we get to see the rest of what's happening in our life. Because again, that black and white thinking, it's like storm clouds come in and isolates, and it puts a tone over everything, right? It's like that book, I don't remember the title, but it's like The No Good, Very Bad Day. And it's like in that book, it talks about negative events cascading on one another, and the whole day is ruined. Where that actually is symbolic of this black and white thinking. When we get very fixed in what we believe is happening, it can color an entire day. I know I've had experiences where I've had great things happen in a day, and then a crappy thing happened, and my mind fixated on the crappy thing, and it just, the whole day was written off. And only when I stopped and reviewed the day did I actually catch it and go, oh my gosh. All right, so I just let this one crappy event take more precedence in my mind than the good things that happened. Wonder why I did that. And then you dig in and you do some contemplation and you look for what it is, right? And usually when you take that time, you're going to come down to the root of it, and it'll all make sense for you. All right, physical outcome at this time: reactions resulting from the fairness shown by your partners. So what's interesting about this is usually when we get these messages and you're the one hearing it, it's sort of the universe saying, hey, you're going to be the instigator of this because now you have added awareness. But what you'll find is there's a chain reaction, right? So even if your partners or the people you're dealing with aren't thinking about, hey, am I in black and white thinking or am I looking for nuance? They might not be thinking about that at all. But when that's your approach and you're in a mindful state where you're either noticing it before it happens or you're catching it as it happens, you're going to have an impact on them. And it's like, it's kind of like this. They're showing me this game of like Pong, right? It's like you served it. They, what's the word? You served it. They volley. You volley back, and it goes back and forth. So it takes one person to create that chain reaction where they're bringing in the nuance and the awareness. And because of that, the other person is reacting to the information being shared differently. And they show a different, more balanced or nuanced quality to you, which then reflects back to you and you send it back. And it creates this beautiful chain reaction of a more harmonious tone. And it only takes one person to start it. And so the universe is letting you know this week, if you're listening, that person is you. And with that, I'm sending you so much love. Have a beautiful week, and I will see you at the next Karma Cards. Mwah. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.